I'm wondering what kinds of things you brought with you that tie into your memories of literacy.
Well, we can't stop that.
Well, why don't we just get up and grab them?
All right, I'll do that.
It's an interview. we can edit. We can cut.
Okay.
No way.
It occurred to me that would be a good thing to do to
Yeah, I think it's an excellent.
tie into the artifacts. You can even hold them up.
Yeah.
Like, look.
Well, I brought artifacts mostly that I thought would relate to digital literacy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, primarily because I don't have very many. I don't have very many artifacts that would relate to, my other literacies. It's been a
Well, and
long
that's
time.
interesting, and this might be where we're actually sort of doing a double thing here. That I thought I have no evidence of digital literacies really, in terms of my own history.
Yeah.
So it makes complete sense. But I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, you're not putting me on the spot at all, actually. This is the thing that I found, and it won't mean anything to anybody looking at it except for the fact that it's an evaluation of a 1983 computer conference held in up at the University of Minnesota, and I was evaluating Lily Bridwell-Wells at that time, and Lily Bridwell-Bowles and Donald Ross's conference. But more, and you'll see it's all, I don't know if you can see it very well, but it's all done in dot matrix. Okay. All right. But what I found, this is where Cindy and I actually met one another, and I met Dickie at that time too. You were up there. And so this sort of is where we began our collaboration, although she likes to point out that I was a graduate student when I did this evaluation, and she read it. It says Computers and Writing, Research and Applications. That was the name of the conference, even that far back. And it says an evaluation of the conference prepared by Gail E. Hawisher. So that's one artifact. I don't know. To have an artifact, of course, as a child.
Oh.
And then we're going to see that Chris has an artifact that's really cool with a sled, and mine is on a bike. Okay, so there's my technology. I don't know, as a 4-year-old, I don't even know when this was written.
Well, and I think that given our generations, we have to define literacy very broadly, that there are technologies of gender, of transportation, and emerging, even musical technologies, because, I had a picture of myself sitting at a toy organ my parents bought me. I loved that organ. So, so I think it is natural to kind of, for us to define it more broadly than, say, people born in the late 70s or early 80s.